All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Making the Argument. Today we're going to be having an important discussion with respect to not only what does it mean to be a man, but what does it mean to actually train to be an effective and capable man, right? Because you can be, let me put it this way. You're male just by virtue of your DNA, right? By your cellular structure, by your physiology. But when it comes to being a man, that means something different. Right. And that's kind of gotten lost within our culture right now. What is a man supposed to do? And we've talked a lot on this. We talked a lot on this podcast about being able to protect, being able to provide. And our guest today, Jason Khalipa from jasonkhalipa.com. This is a guy that has dedicated a lot of his life to developing skill sets and capabilities that were not necessarily geared toward a profession, but geared toward this idea of what does it mean to not just be male, right? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a husband? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a protector and a provider? So very excited to have Jason on today. Jason, thanks very much for being with us, man.
Yeah, man, I'm fired up. I'm excited to chat, and I think that was a great way to open it up. I think one thing that we could do as a community is discuss what it means to protect and provide, because I think there's a few ways you could look at it. My background, I competed professionally in CrossFit for about a decade. I've owned and operated gyms for almost 20 years. We have online programs, and really my goal is to support my local community. I've also been rolling jiu-jitsu for a long time and gotten into firearms training, et cetera. But I think over the years, I didn't have a military or law enforcement background. And so I would think to myself, when people think about the word protect or provide, a lot of times they think of like hunting when it comes to providing, maybe like food, and they protect means whatever it is for you. But I just want to define it for me and what I think of. So when I think about protect, I think about run, jump, climb, lift, fight if necessary, and then obviously use a firearm if necessary. But I think at the bottom of the pyramid, below all else, at the bottom of that foundation has to be your mental and physical fitness. It has to be. Because if you get into a grappling match, if you get into a shooting, whatever, like your conditioning and your strength play a big role there in your ability to be able to think clearly and perform. And, I've seen it firsthand on the mats. I'm sure you have as well, where guys in the beginning, they're great. They know what they're doing. All of a sudden, when they get deconditioned or out of breath, they stop being able to connect the brain with the body. And so at the bottom of that foundation of protecting, I think, is your fitness. So when I think about protecting, it's run, jump, climb, lift. The likelihood of my children, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, maybe not now, but back in the day, the likelihood of them maybe running into the street or needing me in a swimming pool or whatever is much higher than me getting into a physical altercation or having to use a firearm. So I wanted to always have the fitness to be able to protect them by being able to do the physical task. So that's the way I think about protect. Now, with provide, I have a little bit of a different theory too. I think one is if you train hard, I think you can show up at work better. I think you come to it with a better mindset. I think you can provide more financially, personally. If you work out, I think you show up better, which will, in my opinion, lead you to reach your potential more in your career path. But when I think about provide, what it means to me is the ability to be able to provide experiences for my kids. So like this last weekend, I just got done getting scuba certified with my son. And that to me was me providing an experience because I had the fitness to be able to do so. And so I think that provide means if the kids ask you to go do something, the answer is always yes. I don't want to be hindered from the ability to say yes because I physically can't do it. So that's the way I break down provide and protect.
No, and I think it's good because it gets very easy to be pigeonholed into a certain concept of this or to be overly general, right? So like you said, when people hear protect, I see a lot of guys that will talk about, I would protect my family. I would die for my family. I'm like, okay, great. That's I believe you. And the mindset is, yes. I mean, if you took on the responsibility of being a husband, being a father, then you do need to be mentally prepared to like die for your family if necessary. But the real question is can you live for them, right? Like, are you doing the necessary things to be there for them? Because nobody wants their dad to die in a blaze of glory defending them. They want you to be able to provide that safety and security for them so they can thrive. And to your point, providing doesn't just mean I bring home a paycheck, right? If my kids have a roof over their head and they're clothed and they're well fed, have I completed my job as a father? The answer is absolutely not. It's supposed to be raising your children. Again, I'm Bible believing Christian, right? It's this idea is raise your kids in the way that they should go. Well, that means I have an obligation to be able to provide more than just the physical protection and just the material needs. It's about providing that sort of environment that you're talking about. I want to get into something here that I have found, again, kind of interesting about your story on this, because I mean, you didn't just compete in CrossFit, man. You were a friggin' champion in CrossFit, right? You've competed, in several different, high level competitions. You've run your own CrossFit gym. And then you also, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? You learned how to fight. You've learned how to shoot. In fact, you shot so good. I'm gonna give a little bit of crap to my fellow former Green Beret Tim Kennedy, because you guys actually did it was a really interesting competition. I encourage everybody to go and check it out. But Jason and Tim Kennedy, who's a great guy, they did kind of a 3-tiered match with the kind of the physical fitness, stamina, CrossFit style exercises, very, very practical. Then they did kind of a jiu-jitsu grappling competition, and then they did a shooting competition. And I will tell you this much: Tim Kennedy is no slouch when it comes to shooting. The guy knows what he's doing, and you managed to edge him out by 2 seconds. You managed to edge him out by 2 seconds in that. So I don't want to give away all this. I'm not going to say what happened for the other competitions. People need to go and see it. But the reason why I bring this up is when I talk about protect, and people think, okay, Nick was a former Green Beret. Tim Kennedy, former Green Beret. I've talked to John Lovell, great guy over at Warrior Poet Society, another former Army Ranger, Victor Marks, former Marine, goes like all these guys. Here's one of the things that I noticed, and one of the reasons why I find the work that you do and the way that you push people to improve, and specifically push men to improve, so important. I got out of the military in 2009. Right, so I was early 30s, 2009. I got out, the whole deal. I was in good shape, could shoot, could fight, could ruck, could do all the stuff, right? And for about 8 years, I didn't keep up on any of it, right? I didn't keep up on any of it. Like, I'd occasionally work out here and there, but my metabolism was still going, so it's not like I got totally out of shape. But I was not doing anything that could be considered genuine training or working out or staying fit. And I remember one day somebody talking about like, oh man, I'd never want to get in a fight with Nick, or I'd never want to shoot against Nick because, he was a Green Beret.
Right.
And then I went out to my range, because I got a little, range at my house. We got a little bit of acreage that I can shoot on. And I started shooting, and I was crap, dude. Like, bottom line, I was crap. And I used to be pretty dang good, right? Like, I used to be good. Sephardic qualified, which is a high-speed, close quarters battle course. And I've been to different, a ton of shooting. And I remember feeling this kind of like conviction about it. I felt this before, but I remember it really hitting home that point where it's like, Nick, you are resting on your laurels. You are letting everyone believe that you're still the same guy that you were when you actually wore that Green Beret, when in reality, you're getting fat, you're getting slow, and as a result, you're getting lethargic, apathetic, and that's going to affect your mental state. It's going to affect your confidence, and it was that and a couple other things. It was this real come to Jesus moment for me, where it's like, Nick, do you want to just say, I used to be a Green Beret, I used to be Ranger qualified, I used to be a sniper, do you want to be all used to be? Are those stories? Or are they capabilities? And again, your background, you weren't military, but you've gone out and you've developed these skill sets, and watching you apply those skill sets, again, it reinforced to me that it's like, man, I don't want to talk about tabs. I don't want to talk about, accolades. I don't want to talk about that. I want to be able to possess capabilities. So what was it in your own life that took you from, okay, I'm going to be a fitness guy. I'm going to work out. I'm going to do CrossFit. What is it that elevated that beyond just, hey, I want to compete in this field that I find interesting, to something that you really talk about as being more of like a mission?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I think we have similar. I mean, I don't want to say, we have a similar concept there. So, for many years, so I competed professionally in CrossFit. I won the CrossFit Games. I got back on the podium a few times. I competed for Team USA there. Like, I was as deep into CrossFit as you can get. I used to teach seminars for them all over the world, and I'd be traveling, and I'll never forget. I think you could relate to this. Is like, they'd see me, right? And I'm moderate sized guy, like 215 pounds, but I'm relatively muscular, whatever. And people just look at me, and I would get this a lot, like, hey man, like, I don't want to mess with you. That's what I would always get, right? And I would always think to myself, subconsciously like, well, you don't want to mess with me if it's with a barbell, a kettlebell, swimming, running, biking. Like if you give me any physical task, I'm probably going to be, I'm going to perform well. But if we get into a physical altercation, I didn't feel that same comfort. And when I was in, so I started off in the fitness space when I was really young. At 15, I used to work at the front desk of a health club. And inside this health club, as I stayed there and I worked there throughout college, there was a Muay Thai like gym. And so I got into Muay Thai early on. I know you do some MMA and whatnot, but Muay Thai is a very effective form of stand-up fighting. And I did that for about 2 years. This is before I got into CrossFit. This was when I was in college. And I remember realizing like just how deficient a new person can be if someone else had skills, right? So I would be working my jabs, my cross, my kicks, my whatever. And it just always laid this framework in my head that if you don't expose yourself to certain skills, you cannot expect yourself to be good at them. Like, it's like you thinking you can go swim if you've never swam before. It's like you think you could fight if you've never exposed yourself to that type of violence. You just can't. So when this guy would say this to me, it started to affect me. And I remember when I retired from the sport of CrossFit, my daughter got sick in 2016, and I needed something to kind of like unlock my mind and get me into the next phase of what I wanted to train for. And I just was like, dude, I got to get into jiu-jitsu because of what that guy had said. I want to be the guy who could have the skills, if necessary, to protect myself and my family. And that's going to be something, if I put money in the bank today, it'll pay dividends for the rest of my life. And so that's when I started about 8-9 years ago.
Yeah, no, and what you said too about the skill level there is entirely true. Like I remember when my son was the one that said, "Hey, Dad, I want to do some sort of martial art." And I didn't look. I did judo when I was younger, and I did some competitions overseas. I wasn't like fabulous or anything like that, but I was decent. I was pretty good. It was a good experience for me. I did it when I was really young. And I remember thinking, like, son, my son's about to go off to the military as well. I said, look, I want you to have a skill set that is very, very practical.
Right.
I don't want you getting, and I don't mean this to be offensive to anyone, but I don't want you competing and doing katas. Right. I want you to feel confident that you can handle yourself in a fight. And again, it's not to say that katas don't have their value. It just is what it is. Right. So
it's like sport versus, it's like sport jiu-jitsu versus it's just different. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. I want you to feel confident in your ability to handle yourself in a fight. And so we started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing, and look, it was a great experience, great for confidence. The workout's incredible because I will tell you right now, I hate doing cardio. I hate doing cardio. When it comes to, if it's a sport, I like it. If it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, I like it. But like treadmill, I have a hard time with it. I just have a real hard time with it. So anyways, we started doing that. Great workout. But, he was feeling initially, we started, he's like, my gosh, because you have this impression of yourself as a man that, well, if I got, like you said, if I got into a fight, I'd be able to, something would take over and my just inherent man code would, then I'd know how to be frigging Chuck Norris. And it's like, that is not how life works. And so as we're going through this, and I had wrestled, I had done judo, and so I had something of a base, but it had been a long time. And he was kind of starting from scratch, and so he was getting a little bit frustrated, but he was sticking with it. Like mentally, he was in the right space. It's like I'm motivated, and when motivated fails, I'm going to rely on discipline, but I'm going to do it. And I remember the first time we've been doing it for several months, like not very long, right? But several months, enough to where he was starting to get proficient in certain things. And when I say proficient, I mean that relative to the amount of time that we were in, right?
For sure.
And so his buddies all got together, his friend group all together, and they started wrestling and doing stuff. And Luke comes home. He's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, there's a big difference between trained and untrained. It's not, at some point, it's not even a fight. It's not even the same thing. I said, but you're also going to experience that on different levels of training. You can get really good at something, but you go into that next tier and you're right back to feeling like you just started yesterday.
That's right. Well, we were talking about that with Tim, right? The same analogy.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like your son will get back into the gym and he might have felt super dominant against his friends, for example. Now he goes into the gym and he's probably going to find someone. And that's a beautiful part about martial arts. There's always someone who's going to be able to kick your ass for the most part. Like, yeah, there's exceptions, but in general, that's the case.
Well, and I know we've also found a gym where the coach is a great guy. The other people that are there, it's a small class, but they challenge you, but nobody's trying to beat nobody's in there trying to prove something in a sparring match and hurt somebody. They're just trying to push you to your limit and get you to be the best that you can be. And it's a great environment to be in.
Well, and I think for your son, it's a phenomenal environment. For me, with my children, and we've had, ebbs and flows of this, but in general, the goal that I have is once a week to work self-defense with both of them. So my daughter's 13, my son's 10, and I work with them differently. Like with my daughter, I try and create space and get the hell out of there. I mean, she's not going to, dude, if you want to hold my daughter down, you're going to be able to do it. Like, it's just going to happen. And so I just want to teach her how to get out of positions and become a little bit comfortable with grip breaking and creating distance and being loud and aggressive and acting with such violence and aggression if someone puts their hands on you that you didn't welcome, right? And whereas with my son, it's a little bit different, right? I'm trying to teach him positions, submissions, things like that, because he's going to be a little bit bigger. And my goal, especially with my son, is like what I noticed in high school, and I don't know if you can say the same thing, but like in high school, the kids that bullied each other or that bullied others oftentimes lacked self-confidence. And so what I'm trying to do with my son is build up his confidence that he could walk into the room and know that he is physically capable to control the situation if something were to happen, but that he's also super compassionate, loving. And, that's my goal every day with him, is just, how do I teach him skills so he can have the confidence so that he can stand up for someone that might be getting bullied? And that I believe because he has those skills, he'll never be the person that wants to bully because he didn't need that, like, you know what I mean? So that's my intention. I love what you're doing with your son.
Well, let's. I had a similar experience with my daughter. We've homeschooled for almost their entire education, but there was one year when they were in public school, and I remember my daughter, who was in 5th grade at the time, coming home saying, "This girl's threatening me. She's going to beat me up, the whole deal." And I'm like, "All right, well then we need to work on you being able to defend yourself." And I remember her telling me, she goes, "Well, Dad, they don't let us fight in school. We'll both get in trouble." I'm like, "Yeah, nobody gets to take away your right to defend yourself. I'm not teaching you to start fights. I am teaching you to be able to defend yourself. And the moment anybody tells you you're not allowed to do that, I will take it from there. Don't worry." But we went through this whole process. And again, she's telling me this the next day she's got to go into school and potentially deal with this girl. So we're doing what we can in that moment. Right. But it was about talking about fight or flight and then engaging in drills that would help her to look, if you don't want to fight, right, you got to be able to fight. And then here's how you react, and here's how you train that reaction, and here's how you get used to something. And we went through that whole process, right? And she felt confident. And the next day she comes, let me back up a little bit. So we get doing all this, and she's feeling pretty good. Like, okay, I have some idea of what I'm going to do in this situation. And I know this other little girl has not been under the trained in this. But I remember I stopped her at one point. I said, "I want you to understand something before anything happens tomorrow. This little girl that's doing this, that's saying these things, that's using this language in 5th grade, that is probably a really good indication that a lot of bad things are going on at home, right? And so the first thing I want you to demonstrate toward her is grace. Right. I don't want you to try to pick a fight to be able to show what you can do. I don't want you to pick a fight to prove a point. I want you to be able to defend yourself." Right. And she lays a hand on you. Different story. But up until that point, show mercy, show grace, because you don't know what this little girl should not be doing this. She should not have this mindset. Unless she's seen it done or it's been done to her. So just keep that in mind. And it goes to your point about we're not just trying to create a capability. We're trying to create a capability in service to something. Let me ask you this. I think there's a battle going on right now for, we kind of refer to it as a battle for the male mind, right? For a battle for masculinity. What does it actually mean to be not just a man, to be a good man? And there's some people out there that are very, very capable men with some really, really bad messages for young men. And it's picking up. It's gaining steam because, let's face it, if you're a young man and you've been told by your school, by your university, by popular culture, by arts and entertainment that, you know what, you're the problem, you're the source of all the problems in the world. It's your toxic masculinity. It's you wanting to be competitive. It's you having aggression. That's the problem. It's you. At some point, a young man looks at that and says, screw that. Right? I don't know what I'm going to be, and I don't know where I'm supposed to get this guidance, but I'm sure as hell not going to be what they're trying to turn me into be, which is this effeminate, weak version of myself. I'm not going to do it. how do you work and how do you talk with some of the programs that you do, and let's get into that a little bit on what that looks like, but some of the programs that you do to teach men to not only be capable or to train them to be capable, but to be capable in service of something that's honorable?
Yeah, I mean, so every week for 50 weeks, I've been hosting free men's club workouts in a parking lot. So just to kind of back up for a minute, I've owned and operated gyms for 20 years underneath an umbrella called NC Fit, as in NorCal CrossFit. This started off years and years ago.
Yeah.
And then, over the years, I got interested in jiu-jitsu and tactical games and shooting sports. And I wanted an opportunity to, kind of dive deeper with an audience that I felt deeply needed support, which was men. It was calling to me. And it's not exclusive for men, but in general, what I saw in my community was what you're talking about, right? With the youth and my son being 10, I see all these things, and especially living in the Bay Area, there's a lot of technology everywhere around me. And there's a lot of men who desire to get back to some fundamental roots of certain things. And so about a year ago, I'm like, look, I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm going to back this up with action, right? So I ended up just loading up sandbags in the back of my truck. I take them to a local parking lot and we throw down with the group of guys every week. I invite anybody who wants to come. There's no fee structure. It's just come here. We're going to throw down on the asphalt for an hour and then we're going to leave. And I think that more than anything I've done probably in the last however many years has made a positive impact on the community in terms of what you and I are talking about. And I'll tell you why. So we get about 40, 50 guys every week, right? It's different guys, but we get exposure to, hundreds of guys at this point in my local community. And when the guys leave, I get texts from, friends of theirs that I know, like, hey, my husband showed up different today, right? My dad was different when he came home. And it's because I think that we need this kind of like primal, gritty, just get down, especially doing hard things with other men, shoulder to shoulder. I think we need that more. And I think that for many people, we lack that. I think if you do jiu-jitsu or even if you're at a CrossFit gym, I think you get a lot of that camaraderie, but I think a lot of people miss that. And so I'd recommend if you're listening to this and you have a couple of guys in your local area, like just hit them up, man, grab a sandbag and throw down. But back to the whole thing, the goal now is to, as we're with this group of guys, we then go to coffee after. We get about 50% of the guys go get coffee. So now you have like 20, 30 guys. And you start talking about life. And you just came from sweating. And then week after week, you create a deeper bond. You start talking about your kids and your youth and how you want to raise them. And that ultimately is how I'm trying to take my local community and permeate out, which is finding like-minded men who want to wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday to throw down, who then talk about how they're raising their kids and how can I learn from them, and we each learn from each other. Yeah. And I guess that's a long-winded way of answering like one of the things that I'm doing to your point.
No, I think but you mentioned something there that's really important.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you can go to where there's a leader and then people are doing drills or people are doing exercise or whatever else. And it's producer consumer. What you're talking about is exchange.
Yep.
And I think, gosh, dang, I think that's so important, right? It's this idea that you're going to show up and you're not just consuming. You're not just getting the benefit of this workout because you got, a world-class athlete that's helping you through it. You're actually going through and you're exchanging, you're forming relationships, you're forming bonds over the difficulty and the struggle of the physical component, but you're also adding in that intellectual component, that, being able to talk about things that are meaningful and important and being able to share experiences. And I think it's damaging to men when they enter into an environments where they're exclusively consumers. I think when they get that opportunity to both exchange and to bring value as well as receive value, there's an honor in that, and there's an equality in that that's so important. I was explaining to somebody the way Green Berets operate, Special Forces teams. I'm like, there's no way it should work. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you got 12 A-type personalities, predominantly A-type personalities, men on a team that goes off and conducts operations, and we're all supposed to, get along and do the job. It's like, what works? We have common values, we have common training, we have a mission, but then we also have specialization. You have your realm within that team that you develop and that you provide as a benefit to everybody else. So you're not just a consumer of everybody else's talent or strengths or gifts, you're also contributing to that. And that exchange builds respect.
And it builds purpose too, right? I think that a lot of men are lacking. And again, my vantage point, my perspective on this is skewed compared to some. I live in the tech capital of the world, Silicon Valley, and I am surrounded by men who make millions and millions of dollars sitting behind a computer. That's what they do for a living, right? And different things too, right? But at these men's club, like they just come and they get back to this kind of rudimentary, just throwing down. And I think what happens is you can make a lot of money, but then you could lack purpose, right? And I think that as a man, it's so important to identify purpose. And for me, you know, it's obviously reaching my potential as a husband, as a father, to impact as many people as I can through fitness, especially our you know, brand of train hard, like really encouraging people to train hard, because I think it unlocks so much potential in your brain. But like, if a guy doesn't have like a purpose-driven approach, it becomes very difficult, right? And I think that you got to find what that is for you. And it doesn't have to be work. It doesn't have, you got to find something though.
So let's get into that, the physical component, because I know people that will say, like, we one of the things that we talk about in our group is we talk about kind of like these five areas, right? We talk about the spiritual, the intellectual, the emotional, the professional, and the physical. And we're like, look, these are all categories that all not just men, right? All human beings contend with and deal with and want to develop capability and capacity within. And every once in a while I get somebody like, okay, yeah, Nick, I get it, right? I want to develop this, but I'm not a physical guy, right? Maybe I'm not that big. Maybe I'm not that tall. Maybe I always struggled with, whatever it is, right? Whatever, insert issue here. Why do you believe, because I share this belief, but why do you believe that the fitness is so important in a world where, as you said before, the guys that are getting fabulously, for the vast majority of human history, physical prowess was critical because you were either farming or you were going to war or you were blacksmithing or you're doing something else where that physical prowess was incredibly important to your economic and success and just livelihood. Right. And now we're in it where the wealthiest people are the ones, like you said, they know how to work numbers on a computer. And that's wonderful, right? That's necessary. It's a good thing. But why do you think in a world now where arguably the physical prowess of an individual is the least important that it's ever been throughout human history, why do you think it's still important?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. But think about that from like a purpose perspective. Back in the day, hunters, gather, like there was a purpose to this masculine approach, and there was roles. And I think that those roles have adjusted, and I think that we need to be real about how things have changed. Like right now, I'm in a comfortable environment. I am not, if I wanted to, I would not need to expose myself to extreme heats or extreme colds. I would be able to take a car everywhere I want to go. I would alleviate any form of movement, and I could have my food delivered to my house on a regular basis. So the comforts, and don't get me wrong, like, I mean, dude, having access to the world's biggest, the computer in your pocket and air conditioning and heater, like, I'm not saying to get rid of those things. I'm just saying that we have to take a hard look and say, well, what impact has this comfort had on our mental and physical health? And how do we create guardrails to still get the mental and physical benefits we needed over thousands of years while still enjoying the modern day, improvements? Of course, you should be driving a car if you want to go places. Like, you should be doing these different things, right? But that's why I expose myself to extreme heats in the sauna or the cold plunge or extreme hard workouts. But I think, to answer your question verbatim, I think that for a man or a woman, your physical fitness is the single most impactful thing that could then snowball effect into other healthy benefits in your life. I think that if you could dedicate yourself to getting up early in the morning, putting points on the scoreboard, getting in some type of exercise and workout, I believe you're going to show up better for the rest of the day, mentally and physically. I believe that physical fitness unlocks potential in your brain that is so incredibly powerful. Like, will you get better blood markers? Yes. Will you look better naked? Yes. Will you, have more self-confidence? Sure. But how about mentally? How about the fact that you're telling yourself you're overcoming hard things, you're earning your confidence, you're learning how to utilize positive self-talk, you're learning how to understand what's in your control, out of your control, you're just like there's just so many more things to unlock mentally than I think people give it credit for. And for that reason alone, I would start with that as the baseline, and you could build everything above it.
No, I think it's also one of those areas too, for which there's so much stuff that we worry about, or so much stuff that, and it's not that we shouldn't be concerned about various things, but it's amazing to me how much time people will spend worrying about things for which they have little to no control, while at the same time ignoring things for which they do have a great deal of control. And the physical fitness is one of the most obvious. And in part because it's become so easy to not have to develop it. But then you also look at the mental health in this country. Really, yeah, it's huge. And I was listening to, I think it was Jordan Peterson that was talking about this. And I really admire, one of the things I really admire about Jordan Peterson is again, I think he's an incredible researcher, and I like the way that he will explain complex concepts to the layman, but do so in a way that I think is very accessible. But he gave an answer to a question I wouldn't have assumed. And somebody was asking him about, maintaining cognitive ability and how do we, obviously all of us, there's some degree of, inherent natural ability toward various things, right? Some people, by virtue of their birth and the genetics, are better athletes. Some people might be more, have more intellectual prowess, but all of us can get better in all of those areas. And they were asking Jordan Peterson, like, okay, how do you, like, if I really want to develop my cognitive ability, you have such a gift for argumentation and explanation. Like, how do you develop that? And he goes, you don't play these little games that they put on your phone that they advertise as saying, oh, this is going to increase your brain function. He goes, lift weights. And again, I did not, that came out of left field for me coming from Jordan Peterson.
Lift weights.
He said lift weights. And he goes, I don't know how else to put this. He goes, there's study after study after study that demonstrates that if you want to fight, because especially as you're getting older, he goes, if you want to fight against all of those things which decrease your cognitive ability, don't play stupid little games on your phone. Get out there and lift weights. Do physical activity. He goes, because the research is essentially overwhelming that it actually it impacts that intellectual component that we want to develop. I would argue that I think it goes a long way to impacting the emotional component, the professional component. To your little quip there, I made a joke. I did this reel once where I said, why is a husband who's been married for 25 years, why would I still work out? I said, well, there's 3 reasons. I said, 1, I have to provide. And in order to provide, I got to stay physically fit, because if I'm healthy and I'm not running up hospital bills because I'm dealing with stuff that could be avoided with exercise, I can produce more for my family. I got to protect my family, which means if I ever got to get in a fight, I need to be able to go more than 1 round. And I promise to love my wife forever. And if I really want to love her the way she wants to be, well, then I got to be able to go more than 1 round, right? So it's that, and it's, tongue in cheek, but there's a reality to it, to where when you do feel that confidence associated with it, combined with increased physical capacity or capability, increased intellectual capability. And this doesn't mean you can go lift out and never read a book again, right? It just means that you are setting yourself up for success in your intellectual pursuits by engaging in fitness pursuits.
And I think people put it on a pedestal so much, So my wife and I have been together for a really long time. We got together when we were 15. And I think that when it comes to relationships, you need to be able to show up for your family. Like, you have to. And you need to be able to show up composed, detached from your ego, your emotion, if you're taking up some of the stuff from like Echelon Front that they talk about. But I think one of the best ways that I've found to show up best for my wife and my family is through training hard. Like, the thing about it is, I don't know if you feel this sometimes too. And I also think you can get a lot of this from grappling. Have you felt that emotion where like you feel a little anxious, like you feel like you kind of got something brewing in you, like for lack of a better word, testosterone, and you just have to go hit a hard workout or go get crazy on the mats.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you feel a sense of calm and peace. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that when young boys in particular are playing these video games, getting these dopamine fixes and doing all these different things, and they're not exposing themselves to doing hard things that then alleviate that tension, I think that we start to see, kids act out, and then in extreme cases do even worse, right? But I think that as a young man or as a man, I think it's really important that if you're finding yourself freaking out on people or not showing up the way you want to be remembered to your family and your friends, like, dude, exercise could be a phenomenal outlet for you. I'm not saying it's going to solve all your problems, but it sure as hell won't hurt.
Yeah, when we started homeschooling, it was interesting. And one of the things that we were concerned about, there was a lot of things we were concerned about within, kind of the government run school system. And look, everybody needs to make the decision that's best for their family. I'm not, but when we started homeschooling, especially with our son, it was one of those things where we sat there and we thought for a while, like, how in the hell is he supposed to learn when he's 7 years old, effectively sitting in a classroom for almost 6 hours straight, right? Yeah, there's a little break here, a little break there, a little bit activity here, but Tina would do this thing where, like, she'd be going through a subject with Luke, and she could just see he's like antsy, starting to bounce off the walls, and it was like, go outside and run a lap, right? Or it would be like, we're gonna move on to a subject that's gonna let you get outside and do something, or expend some energy and whatnot. And it's not just that Tina wasn't doing that to just cope, right? She wasn't doing that because, oh my gosh, I can't handle this kid right now. She was doing that because, okay, this is an indication that he has energy to get out. Now, are you gonna sit there and demand that he sit there and not do it? Or are you going to provide a positive mechanism and an outlet for that energy? Now, let me caveat one thing here. Yes, all of us need to learn that sometimes you just have to sit there, shut up, and do your thing, right? You got to be disciplined enough to not demand that every time I have energy, I have to be able to go out and disrupt everybody else. No, you got to be disciplined. But by the same token, we're talking about little kids.
Yep.
Right. And especially little boys. I look at the amount of pharmaceuticals we've thrown at little boys in this country because they have a hard time sitting still for 6 hours a day in a classroom. And it's like, you don't think that's going to have greater impacts like on them, on society, where we basically train these little boys that, hey, that need you have to get out, to work, to do something, to lift things, to run, whatever. That's bad. That needs to be, again, chemically suppressed. I mean, it just blows my mind.
10 years ago, we ran a study at the gym, and I'd have to pull up the exact data because I don't want to speak out of turn, but we ran a study, and we wanted to see what was possible with SAT scores. And so what we did is we had a group of students with SATs. And then what we did is we had them come to the gym, work out, and then study after for the SATs. And we wanted to see how their performance improved. Now, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. And the study was like of 20 kids. So we ended up doing it again. But we saw a dramatic improvement. And it doesn't surprise me, right? It doesn't surprise me, especially for the young boys, where they have this excess energy. They get out this energy, and all of a sudden they're awake. Their brain is awake and their body is calm. And so I think that that's something I've really tried to take in with my son and with my children, in particular my son. Well, both of them. The rule in our house was just, you have to sweat once a day. I don't care what you do. Go find something to do, right?
I love it.
Jump on the trampoline, whatever. But in particular with my son, what I've had to do is like, hey man, like we got to make sure we get out of it, because sometimes he'll go to baseball practice and there's not much activity, and he'll still have some, like, you can just see it. And so we got to make sure we kind of make sure he gets some movement in to act the way I know that he wants to show up for other people.
Well, and I think, Sean Ryan and I were actually talking about this. It was like, it's amazing how I sometimes wonder, and I don't, look, I'm not saying this is an absolute statement. I'm just saying, I wonder how many of the things that we've diagnosed as being problematic that would actually be advantages if you just put it within the right circumstances. It's the old Einstein quote that if you judge if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it's going to think it's a failure, right? It's that sort of comparison where you take somebody that's got a lot of energy, or that maybe learns in a particular way, or that can effectively multitask, but you're constantly focusing them to be, just focused on one thing. Well, yeah, they're going to feel like they're just a disruptive, problem child in one environment, but you move them into another one, and all of a sudden, the thing you thought was a disability or problem is now a capability. It's just the thing you needed in this other situation. Yeah. And
Matt Boudreau, right?
Anyway.
You know Matt Boudreau? Yeah. So I love what he's doing, and and I think the practical thing here is that, you homeschooled your kids primarily. My children have not been homeschooled, although I see a lot of value in it. I think that the stigma is evolving, right? Like the stigma used to be, those were the you know,
The weirdos.
It used to be the stigma. Now I think that people's eyes are opening up more to what you talked about. There's some people that learn differently. And I think that being open-minded to that, I think, is key. And then there's these hybrid programs, right? Where like almost like what Matt has at his academies. But I think that for us, you know, our children are traditional, more private Catholic type school. And so I started asking myself, well, if that's the journey we kind of chose as a family for a variety of reasons, because of whatever, what can I do that's in my control to help support that? Right. And so we try and do a lot of things outside of the class environment, because it does, even though it is quite a bit of the day, it isn't the whole day. And so that's something that's in our control for those people that are listening who maybe have their kids in traditional schools. You know, what else can you be doing before or after school? You know, like we always like to get after it before school, whether that's cold plunging, some type of physical fitness for 15 minutes to kind of set the tone for the rest of the day. And then obviously we try and play a lot of sports after they get out.
Yeah. Well, and I went to, like, my experience was I went to a combination of public school, and then I went to a very, very small Christian school. That's actually where I met my wife too in high school. And look, I had a good experience, right? I had a good experience. And so I think it's always important that people find the thing that works best for them, but also be aware that every single option that you pick is going to come with advantages and disadvantages. The question is that how do you mitigate disadvantages and how do you enhance advantages in order to give the best possible experience? And the involvement is one of the most important things that you can possibly do is being active. I always say that it's like, look, there's a lot of different educational approaches that can work, provided that you recognize that you are still primarily responsible for your kids' upbringing and education. The 100%. Moment you look at it as, I have outsourced it to somebody else and this isn't my problem anymore, I don't care what option you choose, it's not going to give them the experience that they need the most. You have to take ownership of it. But let me ask you this, because it was funny. We had chatted back and forth on Instagram a couple of times, like sending a couple of direct messages. But I had put out something a while back where I said, all right, I've been going to a gym for a while. Yeah, I've been going to a gym for a while. I want to do something at home. This is the kind of system I'm looking for. And you sent me a direct message and you said, hey, I'd be happy to show you kind of what my thing is or my setup is. Here's what I'd like you to do. There's a lot of people that are probably watching this that think, okay, yeah, this is all great. And philosophically, principally, I agree with you guys on this, but how do I fit into what I do like if I don't got a ton of money, right? And I can't afford to do a lot of stuff, or I don't have, my job is killing me and I got job and I got school and I got everything else. And they're not just excuses, right? They're legitimate reasons that draw on their time that make it difficult for them to maybe get as fit as they would like to or spend as much time into it. What would you recommend as someone that is, you know, not only looked at this from the practical standpoint, the kind of the cultural standpoint, but also the scientific standpoint, like things that work and things that don't? How does somebody kind of get started and maximize their time to where they feel like, you know what, this is tough and it's going to take some getting used to, but it's working? Like what do you recommend on kind of like starting off with something like that?
I mean, I think the fitness space has done itself a disservice by putting certain things on a pedestal over the years. If you look at historically how things, like imagine like how things were hundreds of years ago. People just moved. They got in movement. And so at the foundation of what we need to do as a society today is just move. So if nothing else that you take away from this episode is that we got to get back to movement. And so if you're finding yourself, like right now I'm at a standing desk, and if I shared with you the amount of movement I've done today, you'd be like, wow, that's pretty excessive. But it's just built into my lifestyle. If I'm doing something with a family, we're walking. If I'm doing something, like we're just trying to build things in. If I'm on a call, I'll put a loaded backpack on, I'll go for a ruck. And I think that we at times think it's like all or nothing. Like if I don't have 2 hours to go to the gym, I can't do anything. That's a myth. So I think the most important thing that a listener can take away is start asking yourself this really simple question. Do you have 15 minutes, 3 days a week? Do you have that? Do you have 15 minutes, 3 days a week? Let's just start there. And if you don't, I mean, fundamentally, you have something wrong in your life or you're not prioritizing effectively like, I don't know what to tell you. And then in addition to that, right, what are you doing where you can start putting some points on the scoreboard without impacting your life. So for example, this weekend, my son has a baseball tournament. I imagine many people that listen to this go out to their kids' practice all the time. I keep an 80-pound sandbag in the back of my truck so that I could always get in a workout when my son is at practice. Like, it's that simple. I make it accessible. So the most important thing to keep in mind is that if you're limited on time, you want to look for compound movements that really impact your kind of CNS, your central nervous, like they really load your body. So
what's like 3 or 4 examples of that?
A thruster. So taking a set of dumbbells and putting them on your shoulder, or a sandbag, squatting below depth, standing and pressing overhead. The question would be, what type of muscle groups does a thruster incorporate? I don't know, everything. It's more of looking at it in terms of the function and less about the actual muscle groups incorporated. So if you have more time, dude, get in your bodybuilding, work your biceps, your triceps, your lats, your whatever, like do it. But if you're limited on time, you want to look for movements that produce a lot of power and give you a big bang for your buck. And those movements typically are compound in nature and move through a long range of motion. Things like thrusters, things like squats, things like pressing, things like cleaning it to your shoulder. Right before I got on this episode with you, I did a 12-minute AMRAP. So what that means, are you familiar with like AMRAPs and EMOMs and stuff like that?
No.
Okay. So, and this is like a whole thing we could talk about how to look at the framework of training, but AMRAPs are as many reps or as many rounds as possible. And EMOMs are every minute on the minute. And those two are the most impactful ways of training ever, because you could do a lot of work in a shorter amount of time. So right before I got on with you, I did a 12-minute AMRAP, meaning I fought and was focused for 12 minutes to get through a series of 4 exercises. I took an 80-pound sandbag and I did 6 to my shoulder. So just clean. Then I did 6 burpees. Then I did 6 back squats. Then I did 6 burpees. And I repeated that for 12 minutes. At the end, I'm drenched. I got an effective full body workout and I'm ready to take on my day. And I think what's happened is people who sit there like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym. It's like, bro, get a sandbag. We have them available on our website. I could, get a program. We have a sand program. Get a set of dumbbells and hit it 3 days a week. Look to push, look to pull, look to squat, look to add load, and get that full body stimulus.
Got it. Now let me ask you this: when it comes to times of the day, I have a friend that we were pushing him to get in the gym. We're like, come on, you want to do it, and he did. You want to do it. He goes, okay, fine, but I can't go in the morning. I hate going in the morning. Me personally, I love starting off my day with it because I feel like no matter what happens for the rest of the day, I accomplish something right off the bat. And I feel like my headspace is so much better. But is there any big advantage, disadvantage? Like what's your take on that?
I mean, if you look at like scientifically, there's, I think one thing is you have to be careful of it not to impact your sleep. So for me, I can't do jujitsu past like 5 p.m. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to go to sleep until after 11. So
you're going to be amped up.
Yeah. So I think that's one factor. I recommend starting it off in the morning only because it really builds a snowball effect for the rest of the day. But the bigger thing is like, dude, if you're not dreading it, like if you're dreading it, you got to get it over with. But if you're like, oh dude, like me, for example, I always do something in the morning. I do something in the afternoon. And sometimes I do something in the evening with sports. I don't dread my afternoon training session. I love this stuff. So it's fine to put it in wherever I want. But if you're someone who's like, dude, fitness is just not something I look forward to, you got to reframe it in terms of like, hey, I'm going to dedicate 20 minutes to myself in the morning. I'm going to have a super effective workout. And I know it's going to help me protect and provide for myself and my family, my community. And, as a husband, as a father, like I don't ever want to have to say no because I physically can't do something. Like it's really important. That scuba diving that I just got done, they had a 10-minute tread water test and a 200-meter water swim just to be able to make sure you could do that. Well, what if I wasn't working out? So if you're listening to this and you're a husband and you're a dad, I mean, imagine if your kid wants to go do something, you have to say no. Like get up tomorrow and go do a series of things. So every Monday, I'm doing this. If you want to join me, it's 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats every Monday. And you could break that up however you want. But all it does, it kind of level sets you for the rest of the week. Like, hey, I'm ready to crush it this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's well, and again, going back to the, the point of why, why we do it all. I was joking with somebody. I do a lot of videos on being a girl dad, right? And I have 2 girls and a boy.
Congratulations on the wedding, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you. And look, I could not ask for a better son-in-law. I really couldn't. Just absolutely great guy.
You have no idea what a blessing that is for me to hear. Like, I'm so happy for you. Like, I want nothing else in my life than to see my children find their queen, king, whatever, and like have someone there with them for the rest of their life. Like, dude, that's badass. Yeah. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Oh, it is I cannot even tell you what a huge blessing it is. It really, because this is as a dad, right? You worry about your sons and your daughters differently. You love them the same. You want the best for both of them, but you worry about them differently. That's just the reality. And that's the biggest one is like, this is my oldest daughter. This is the first time I've having to relinquish the primary responsibility for the protection and provision of my daughter to another man, right? That is not a small thing. Mm-mm. But one of the things I had told somebody, I had this joke once where I said, the hardest part about your daughter's dating is hiding the bodies. And then I said, just kidding. It's not that hard. But it was this joke. And I remember my son-in-law who was dating my daughter at the time, he goes, Mr. Freitas. So what is it, man? And he goes, hey, all the guys at work, whenever you do these videos, think you're low key talking about me. I said, oh, we'll do a video together and I'll tell them what a great guy you are and whatnot. So we did that and it was fun. But he's like 6'6". He's huge. Big dude. And I remember talking to somebody about this and like, what's it like when your daughters start dating and boys are coming around and they express interest? I said, I always wanted to be that dad, that I had such a good relationship with my daughters that they would, believe me when I told them, hey, I don't know about this guy, or whatnot, that they would want my approval, not because I had insisted upon it, but because they valued my opinion and they knew that I loved them and wanted the best for them. Right. I always wanted that relationship with all my kids, but specifically talking about my daughters here. I say the other thing too, is I want to be that guy that boy can be legitimately intimidated by me.
Yeah.
Not because I want to be a jerk, not because I want to be a punk. And I said, look, here's what it is. I'm not saying your daughter wants you to beat up their boyfriend. I'm saying your daughter wants to know you could, right? And that was motivation for me. I wanted to be the sort of father that my kids, and specifically my daughters, felt as if daddy's there, if dad's there, I'm safe. I'm safe. Look, let's face it, it's harder to do that if everyone knows you can't, drag yourself from the couch to the refrigerator, right? Like but I do think, like you said, I think it's one of those things where when it comes to finding motivation and finding purpose, it's easy I will say this too, it's easier to do that, I think, when you are a husband and a father, especially if you really want to do right by your what do you say to the guys that they don't have that yet? Right? Maybe that isn't the source of their purpose and motivation, because one of the things that concerns me is a lot of the guys that I see kind of jumping in this space and being like, yeah, I'm going to be capable. I see some of the motivations behind it. I'm a little bit worried. On why they're developing these capabilities. I'm glad they are, but I'm a little bit worried about motivation behind it. So what do you say to the young single guy, especially right now, that feels like the culture's against him, that may be feeling like, am I really going to find a woman or a wife that I want to build a family and a relationship with? What do you say to that guy in order to get him motivated, in order to get there and start this on, like, starting with square one on, hey, get in shape?
Yeah, I mean, I think your physical presence says a lot. I think that when you walk into a room, if you're physically fit, physically capable, it brings an aura into the room that people could pick up on. And I think, like, for you with your son-in-law, which again is a huge blessing, I hope that I have the same experience. I want him to feel the same way. Like, dude, I want him to know, like, hey man, like, and I'm going to train you. Like, if I really think that you're the guy, I'm going to spend as much time as I can training you, because you're like you're like another guy that could be on be on the team.
You're on the team now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's like, and then you get your son involved, and now it's like, dude, all right, you're good.
Yeah, I got my fire team.
Yeah, you got your team. But I think that there's something about the physical presence I think makes a big difference. And I think that that's something that people should consider, is that even if you don't get into combatives or shooting or any of that kind of stuff, which is fine, your physical presence alone can create a level of comfort for people that require that they need your help, right? But if you can't get off the couch, that's a problem. And I think that that plays into a single mentality that, you know, I believe the greatest gift that I think a young man can receive is, and fitness plays a role in this, is finding themselves someone that's got their back no matter what. And in my case, it was finding myself, quote unquote, a queen, right?
Yeah.
Finding someone that in business, in life, you know, my family, we've had a lot of ups and downs. Like we've had a lot of different things, from business to sick kids to you name it. And having someone there that no matter what is on the same team, shared vision, and wants to win together, I think could really allow a young man to thrive. And I think that, you know, I think that it's a necessity. And with that in mind, I think that you need to present yourself to the world in a way that attracts that person. And a part of that is taking care of yourself. And you know, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not inspired, if you're not motivated, if you're not driven, you're not going to attract the person that you want to do life with forever. And that would be the inspiration, I would say, to get up tomorrow and go do something hard, and then do it again the next day. And then over time, it'll start building these habits. And I think that when you do that, you'll not only find people with shared visions that I think might introduce you to a whole new network, but I also think you'll start attracting people that look at that as a positive attribute, which I think is only going to enhance your life for the future.
I could not agree more. Again, my wife and I got married a year out of high school. We had no money. Difficult times. The first 10 years I was in the military, which was the first 10 years of our lives together. I was gone for half of it, right? Between deployments and war and everything else. And I had somebody once tell me, they're like, man, do you ever look back and think it would have been better if you guys would have waited a couple years? And I always say, no. I am so glad we went through the tough times with no money and difficulty and everything else, because I know she's there for the long haul. She knows I'm there for the long haul. And if it comes down to it, her and I against the world, man.
Dude.
And one of the things that I know we tried to reflect for our kids was like, yeah, we want this for you, right? We want this for you. And a conversation I've had with my son and my daughters before is that, you know, to find that person, because I hear so many people today talking about how difficult it is to find that person. And I get it. I don't want to, again, I'm 44, right? So I don't want to pretend like I understand what it's like for a young man or a young woman today trying to find that person. But I do know this much. There are certain things that are concrete. There are certain things that are fundamental that kind of transcend time and space. And to your point, one of it is like, you think in your mind, like, who do I want to build a life? What is the sort of woman, who's the sort of man that I want to build a life with? And then you go look at yourself in the mirror and like, am I worthy of that person? Am I worthy of that person, right? Am I doing the things right now that is going to make the person I'm going to fall in love with me? And to your point about the physical fitness, and I cannot emphasize this point enough, because I think you're right. To some degree, physical fitness has become synonymous with looks and attraction. And that's because they're connected, right? That bottom line, they're connected, is what it is, and it's not a bad thing. But that's not the totality of it.
No.
The discipline of getting up and saying, I'm going to do something difficult, not because I want to brag about my bench press, but because it's difficult. I'm going to do something hard because it's hard. I'm going to prove that I can do it. I'm going to prove that I can consistently do it, because what it demonstrates far beyond the physical is a mindset that says, I don't let difficult things keep me from accomplishing what I need to do.
Well, and, you know, pulling on that same thread, right? Like, when you're training, if you're only training for an aesthetic look, let's just say right now it's like August, July, and maybe a couple months ago you're like, hey, I'm gonna start training hard. I'm gonna do 100 sit-ups a day because I'm going to Cabo and I want to look good, right? That's like the inspiration. Yeah. Or I got a wedding coming up. I'm gonna drop 20 pounds. I'm gonna look hella good. The reality is that after the wedding, after the thing, it becomes very hard to maintain that because your why wasn't very deep, right? So if you could find a deeper why, it'll help you stay as fit as possible for as long as possible for the rest of your life. Like for me, I want to be fit, capable, healthy for my kids and my grandkids. I want to be that guy. Like, and so if I'm looking at this on the next 50-year horizon or whatever, because I'm 38, well, then I need to make sure that whatever I'm leaning on to keep me inspired has a strong, like, depth to it. Otherwise, if it's just to, get a six pack or whatever, it'll just come and go, right? You got to have something deeper. Now, it's cool to have goals. Like, I'm competing I just did that thing with Tim, then I'm competing in tactical games. I'm competing in a high rocks. Like, I'm competing in a jiu-jitsu tournament. That's cool. But my longer term why is to show up for my family, to protect and provide.
Yeah. Yeah. No, one of the things that we were excited about, Tina and I got married very young, 19 and 20. Our oldest daughter just got married at 21. And Tina and I were looking at it. It's like, we're going to be grandparents in our 40s.
Dude.
And I love that. I am so here for it because, well, one, they did everything the right way. And so I'm not worried about, having to, kill anybody. But, but the other side of this is, it is that thing where it's like, I want to be the grandpa that, when I'm in my 60s, doing stuff with my grandkids is not crazy. It's like, oh, grandpa can't do that. No. I want to be able to maintain that. I want to be able for as long as is within my control to physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, professionally show up for my family. I want them to get the best from me because I love them. And you're right. When you have that kind of motivation, when you work toward building the things that are necessary to establish those relationships and continue them, it just provides this constant source of motivation going forward. And yeah. Well, listen, Jason, I really appreciate you taking the time. Tell people more. Where can they find out more about you, what you do? You've got this great thing you do with Gabe as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I feel like. Well, I'm going to be talking to you on our show. So I have a podcast called the Jason Khalipa Podcast. You could definitely check that out. I also, if you live in the Bay Area, you could visit one of our gyms, but really it's th.fit. So it's train hard. So th.fit. And we just rolled out a brand new 10-week sand program. So if you're short on time, the goal is like you put a sandbag in the back of your truck or whatever you drive, and you can go anywhere, anytime, and go hit a workout. And I think that, check that out. And then you can obviously see me on Instagram at Jason Khalipa. But I'd really encourage anybody listening, and I wish I had another hour to talk about this. I just cannot share with you guys enough how you can't let momentum get to zero. You got to just do something. You can go for a walk, a ruck, or whatever, but everybody has time. But think about those compound movements. And if you want to hit it with me every Monday, the 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 sit-ups, I'll be sharing it online.
No, that sounds great. And listen, I definitely hope this is not the last time we have you on. I'd love to talk more, and I'd love at some point maybe to do something kind of a bonus on talking about some of the specifics and what does it look like and the reasons behind it. Because again, I know it was, like I said, from age 31 to like 39, I kind of just went on autopilot. Rested on my laurels and whatnot. And then one day I remember waking up and thinking, if I don't make some changes right now, this is going to have a negative impact on my health for the rest of my life, which means it's going to have a negative impact on my family. And I'm not allowed to let that happen. I'm not allowed to let that happen. So once again, Jason, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please go check out jasonkhalipa.com. Check that out. Again, if you're just looking to start anywhere and you want to talk to a guy that, again, is not just he's not just a talking head out there saying, do this. This is something where he has done this consistently over time, successfully. And it is such an important part, not just for men too. It's an important part for women as well. All of us, when we do this and we do it for the right reasons, with the right motivations, what ends up happening is it improves all of our life, not just one aspect of it. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.